Welcome to the Reality Revolution. I have a special episode today. We're bringing back Bri Seeley. Bri Seeley is my coach. She is an entrepreneur coach, and she has run a number of amazing programs, and she has helped people to start their business, to expand their business. And today what we're talking about is helping you to move to actualize your future self. We get a lot of people, Bri does as well as I, that I'm coaching, that come to me that are willing to put in the work to meditate and visualize, but they're not willing to take that step forward and move into the gap from where they are now to where they want to be. And so I wanted to bring Bri back on so we could really talk about this, because there's a lot of people listening right now that are literally just 1 second away to achieving all their dreams. All they have to do is take this really important step. So welcome to the Reality Revolution once again, Bri. It's great to see you. How you been?
Oh my gosh, I'm so happy to be back, Brian. I love our conversations. You're in my mind all the time because I'm also always listening to you, even when we're not having conversations. So it's such a blessing to be back here with you and chatting up one of my favorite topics.
Yeah, I've been following you, and you've had some speeches recently. You've been speaking at some conferences. How's that going?
Good. I also launched my own conference, which was the biggest, craziest, most difficult thing I've ever done. But, I'm very, I think a lot of people describe it as obedient. Like when ideas come and they ask me to partner with them and create them and bring them to life on the physical plane, I say yes very often. Even though I have no idea how it's going to happen. I have no idea what I'm doing most of the time. I just say yes, and I figure it out. And so I launched a women's conference, which was very hard, and it was very stressful, and it was very worth it.
Awesome. So if anybody, I would recommend that you go to our previous interviews. We have an interview on the channel, and then we have an interview that we had for RealityCon 3, the large sums of money activation. And in that, we talked about the spirituality of entrepreneurship and why becoming an entrepreneur is a more profound way to actualize and manifest your goals. And we continued that conversation as well. And I've learned a lot about my own entrepreneurial journey and prosperity journey. They're intertwined. And so it's very, very powerful and interesting. I always learn a lot from Bri. So before I get into all those details, you have really made it your focus to help women out. And I noticed that structurally, in some cases, if you even just look at the way that women are employed in the business world, it seems that we maybe even subconsciously or culturally treat the entrepreneur or the person who's starting a business in a masculine way. And so it limits structurally a lot of opportunities for women to do the same things that men are doing. So that has, I know, been part of your goal and purpose, is to help bring women along. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I've actually been having this conversation a lot recently about how there's kind of this idea or this perception of what entrepreneur is and what entrepreneur means. And actually, a really good friend of mine told me last year, she said, "Oh, I don't consider myself to be an entrepreneur." And I was like, "Tell me more. Why not?" And she said, "Well, entrepreneurs are like the Jeff Bezos and the, Elon Musks of the world. And I'm not one of them, so I'm not an entrepreneur." And it's really interesting that a lot of women don't resonate with that title in a way. They resonate more with small business owner or self-employed, but not this idea of being an entrepreneur. And so I actually really like doubling down on this idea of women being and becoming entrepreneurs, because I think we do have a huge opportunity to take our destinies in our own hands. For the hundreds of years, women have been underpaid, under-resourced in the workforce, things like that. And it's well, we kind of have an option. We're almost at a breaking point. We can stay in this sandbox where all of the resources have been withheld from us. We are basically just told, well, at least you're in a sandbox, so be happy in the sandbox. Yet there's another sandbox where there's an unending like abundance of shovels and toys and castles and like all this stuff. And literally it just takes us, like we're going to talk about, minding that gap between going from one sandbox to the other sandbox and having the faith and trust that we're going to be able to navigate the new sandbox, that we're going to be able to find the tools and the resources that we need to be successful in that sandbox. And so I'm all about helping make that transition, that journey, easier for women. I do obviously still work with men as well, but I find that because so many women are afraid to take that step into entrepreneurship, and because women have been under-resourced in the workforce for so long, it's just a particular passion point of mine to specifically help that population of humans.
Now, it's a total side. I'd love to get your perspective just briefly about Elizabeth Holmes and the cartoonish way that she would like change her voice to try to be more masculine in a business environment. There's like this inner subconscious fear that obviously was what she was going on with. She didn't have to do that.
Yeah.
She can embrace who she is instead of trying to be something she's not, right? Tell me, what was your perspective of that?
I think I didn't get in on the Elizabeth Holmes thing until like way after it was
movies,
like all
right?
over. Basically, I watched the movie and the documentary. But I think there has been this idea that women have to change inherently who they are in order to succeed in a business setting. And, one of the things, I have a little sign that sits next to my computer that says unapologetic AF. And I firmly believe that the more we can be ourselves and the more we can use our unique skill sets and our unique idiosyncrasies and, like the little things that make us, whether you're woman or man, the more that we can use who we are in the business world, the better. Like people hire me because I'm me and right. I'm just me. I'm me, whether I'm sitting here talking to you. I am me, whether I'm, with my boyfriend making dinner, with his family, with my friends, with my cat, I'm just me. What you see is what you get, regardless of who you are in my life. And that is why people hire me, is because they know that I'm authentic and I'm going to tell them the truth and I'm going to support them and I'm going to encourage them. And so I think the more any of us can just be authentically ourselves. And, speaking of the spiritual path, what is more spiritual than just being who we came here to be?
Exactly. So one of the main focuses I've had on my podcast recently is stepping into the gap. More and more, this is one of the key fundamental problems. I can talk about prosperity consciousness all day long. You can read a book, you can say an affirmation 1,000,000 times, but you will still remain in this place where you are now. And what I am fascinated by, and it is the goal of my life, is to help those people that come to me that are desperate for change, that want to transform their life, that are in that place now, and for them to move from this place where they're at to where they want to be, that future self, where they achieve their goals. And oftentimes I find that they're willing to sit and do the meditation. They're willing to do some of the important work, but they're not willing to take that step outside of their front door into the gap to make and take the actions in order to see their goals come into fruition. There's magical thinking sometimes, which I have no problem with. There should be magical thinking, but that magical thinking can limit them. They think, well, if I just sit on my couch and wait, then there's somebody's going to knock on my door. And then I literally will get these texts and emails. Brian, nobody's knocked on my door. And nobody is going to knock on your door. The universe is just waiting, begging for you to step outside the door. And I know that you have seen this fundamentally in your coaching. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, it's one of the things that I think people fail to understand is that so many people are standing around waiting for a sign. They're waiting for someone to grant them permission. They're waiting for something outside themselves to say, okay, it's time. And unfortunately, The universe will meet you where you want to go, but you have to take the first step. You know, like if you're standing at a bar, I don't go out to bars anymore, but if you're standing at a bar and you like, you know, see someone who you're like, oh, that person's like attractive, like, I hope they come talk to me. And then you're standing at the bar all night long, waiting for them to come talk to you. You have to be the one to go make the first move. And the same is true with the universe. And don't get me wrong, I want to stay at home and sit on my couch just as much as everyone else does. Believe me, if that were an option for me, I was single for about 12 years, and I'd moved to LA about 3 years after I broke up with my last boyfriend. And my roommate at the time, love him to death, still a very dear friend. You know, I would talk all the time about like, oh, I want to meet my person. I want to meet my man. I da 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 da. And he would always say to me, Bri, you literally have to leave the house. And not just like leave the house and go sit in your office all day alone, running your business. Like, you actually need to put yourself out there, because your husband is probably not knocking at your office door. He's definitely not knocking at our apartment door. And if you really truly want the things you say you want, you have got to be an active participant in the process. Meditating is amazing. That's not being an active participant. Like you said, saying affirmations is amazing. That's not being an active participant. You have to have some skin in the game. You've got to get out there and be in it. You got to get your hands dirty. You got to, you know, like knee deep in the mud, you know, in the midst of the process in order for the universe to meet you there.
So I know it's a minor part. I'm not stereotyping, but could it be that dating also has a reflection in business? Like, women may be more love it for a guy to come up and make that first move. And I've met women that will not make the first move, right? They think as long as he comes and comes to me, you know, so it goes to business. Like, they're waiting for somebody else to make the first move in business, and they can't. And it's not a masculine or feminine, but it's deep, so subtle, right?
Well, and even things down to like the idea of like even starting a business, right? Like, oh, well, I'm waiting for the universe to show me it's time, or I'm waiting for my significant other to support me and tell me that I can go do this. I'm waiting for like, what?
Right.
You don't need to wait for anything. And the longer you sit around waiting for something, the longer you're going to be waiting for something. Like, it's really takes you to go out and start committing to courageous action. And that doesn't mean that you're going to go from sitting on your couch to like getting married tomorrow. What it does mean is you have to take a baby step today, and you have to take another baby step tomorrow. And you have to start walking into, as you deemed it, the gap. And people are so afraid of the unknown. And again, full transparency, definitely not a huge fan of the unknown. There's a lot that exists in the unknown that we don't know, which is why it's called the unknown. And everything that every single one of us wants and desires exists in the unknown.
Everything.
Everything.
So in general, what is the tipping point to where you know you've done the work and now it's time to take that action? What would you say the tipping point is to taking that first action and moving into the gap?
I mean, you know, a lot of people wait until they're like really, 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 really fed up. And that's their tipping point to finally be like, they're pissed off enough to like go out and do something about it. I don't think people have to get that far. I think that you can act from inspiration rather than desperation or anger. You know, if you know that you want something else in your life, there's literally nothing stopping you from taking an action today. And that action is going to look different for everyone. I talk a lot about inspired action. Your action is going to be informed by, one, where you are right now, and two, the destination that you're going to. And then your next inspired action, after you take that first inspired action, your next inspired action is going to be informed by where you are now. and where you're going to. And so your inspired actions also change and morph with you. It's a very intuitive process. And so you have to, meditation is part of the process, but as we've talked about, too many people stop with the meditation. They do the meditation, they get insights around an action they can take or should take, and they don't do it. And then they sit down to meditate again the next day, and they get another action that they could take, and they don't do it. And they, you know, like, and that, then that gap between where you are and where you want to be, not only is it still there, but if you continue to get inspired actions that you're not taking action on, it just keeps getting wider, and you actually start getting further from that future vision that you have of your life.
It's a fascinating phenomenon. It really is. That, and I know that you're aware of this because you have worked with people that are in my group and my subscribers that follow my channel. I mean, like attracts like. So I'm doing prosperity videos all the time. And so I attract people, obviously, that are struggling with their prosperity, they're aware of their lack mindset. And so I end up talking to people all the time. It's amazing to me the significance of, not everybody. There's some amazing people that have made the change, but I talk to people all the time that are suffering because of their mindset, and they're incapable of taking an action, getting coaching, choosing that coaching program, putting a little bit of money down towards their goals or dreams, purchasing that advertising, getting that copywriter, whatever it is. There's usually something that they have to do. And what I have found, it's always just a little bit uncomfortable. Like the ones that I've seen become successful that I've worked with are willing to take that little bit of a step that's a little uncomfortable. There's no way around it. It's always going to be a little bit scary, a little bit uncomfortable. Do you notice this pattern?
Oh my gosh. Well, not only with other people. Did we talk about my car accident on the last
No, I don't
conversation?
think so.
Okay, so rewind a little bit with me. 2015, March 2015, in fact, and was March 19th, 2015, because it was my sister's birthday.
Wow.
And I got into a massive car accident on my way into my office. So much so that my car was totaled. I did not have the proper insurance on it. And adding a little caveat, my car was totaled without a scratch, a bump, a bruise, or a sore muscle, right? Like, this is how I was like, this is a divine intervention, right?
Yeah.
So I had, the weekend prior to that, spent 3 days learning wealth consciousness. I had learned wealth consciousness and invested my time with this amazing coach and learned all of these things. And I knew walking out of that I needed to hire this coach to work with me. So literally signed the contract to work with the coach. It was, I'm going to name the number here because it is a terrifying number, $25,000 coaching contract. Literally the next morning, I totaled my car. Do not have the proper insurance, and the company offers me $600 for parts.
Oh my gosh.
So
wow.
Here I am living in Los Angeles, with now a $25,000 coach, no car. And to make matters worse, 2 days later, I was meditating and the universe guides me to shut down my business. So now I have a $25,000 coach, no vehicle, and a new car payment because I'm getting a new vehicle, no business for which the $25,000 coach is going to help me, and no income. Scary. And terrifying. Terrifying. I had no clue how it was going to all work out. I literally was in the gap and could not see anything in any direction. What I did have was, I knew what I wanted for my future, and I knew that I was not there. And so I took a leap of faith and I worked with that coach. And within a year, I had a 6-figure business. And I say all the time, 100%, I would not be sitting here talking to you 8.5 years later if I hadn't stepped into that gap. If I hadn't trusted that vision of my future self over my present conditions, because my conditions did not look good. In fact, I didn't tell most people what conditions I was facing because I was so ashamed. I was so terrified. And I knew that if I told anyone I just hired a $25,000 coach with no business, no income, and now a new car payment, that people would think I was absolutely bananas, like commit me to like not good things. So I did it. And because I did it, 8.5 years later, I'm here to tell the tale of it, you know, like, but that's, I see this with a lot of people all the time. It's that when we commit to what we say we want, it's a scary process, whether it's a $1,500 commitment or a $25,000 commitment. It's always scary, no matter what level commitment that is. And I'll say 8.5 years later, when I take big steps like that, they're no less scary today than they were 8.5 years ago, because it's always that like stepping into the gap of the unknown. But if you want to change your trajectory, you have to. It's not negotiable.
Now, one thing I've talked about in relation to stepping into the gap is your focus at the beginning of it is, what is other people going to think? And you spend a lot of time worrying about what other people will think of your choice to take the action, your choice of the business that you want to do, whatever it is. And so people will sometimes subconsciously, but not take that action because they're so concerned about what other people think.
Yeah, which is completely like, if we look at the like brain chemistry, like the way that our brains work and the way that we've been socialized, like all the way back to caveman days. Like if we got rejected from our tribe in caveman days, sudden death, right. Absolutely no possibility of survival, period. So like it makes sense. But I just met someone the other day and I can't remember who it was, but they had a tattoo on their arm that said, "There is no tiger." Because our brain makes up these, like, if my parents tell me that I'm crazy for taking this action, therefore they're going to reject me, therefore I'm going to be alone, therefore I'm going to, you know, like your brain is basically making up a tiger. But we live in an era where like, I'm literally not going to get eaten by a saber-toothed tiger today. It's just not going to happen. So our brain is constantly telling us that like, if we get rejected from the tribe, we will die. And the truth is that's not going to happen. And the other truth is there's a better tribe waiting for you. Exactly.
A lot of times, some of that tribe is going to fall away. And
absolutely,
you just have to be open and allow that to happen. If mine was my parents, and unfortunately, it's not something I overcame. I lost 20 years. I could be doing exactly what I'm doing now, writing my book and helping other, but I didn't, because I was worried about what my parents would think. And I only started doing this when they had both died. And I could have easily started before, but I wasn't even aware that there was a block there because of it, right? A lot of times it's family and parents and brothers and sisters that people are so worried about.
Yeah, it's true. And, you know, to be quite honest, I mean, I've seen it a lot. I've seen people get divorced because, you know, they outgrow each other. But the thing I always look at is it more important for you to hold on to what has been and prevent yourself from the things deeply, deeply, deeply calling your heart? Or like, they're not living your life. So you're making yourself miserable, consciously or unconsciously, based on your past. What if, and I know you talk a lot about this concept, you had the ability to free yourself of that and trust that the right people are going to come with you, the wrong people won't. And if they want to stay tethered to their pasts, cool. We all have free will. They get to choose that. And sometimes by you taking that action, they actually will move then with you and you'll inspire them and they'll be excited to then do what they've been preventing themselves from doing, because you went first and you took the action and you then therefore gave them subconscious permission to follow their own thing. And it's really beautiful what happens when people have the gumption to actually go for it. It's really beautiful. And you'll find lots of other people. I mean, a lot of what I do is group-based because I love meeting. I love new entrepreneurs meeting other new entrepreneurs. I love people coming together and finding new community. There's 2 members of your community, both were enrolled in one of my programs, who both came to Tulsa for my conference, and they both got to meet in person, one from Hawaii, one from Idaho. They both got to meet in person for the first time, whereas otherwise they might not have gotten to do that if they had remained committed to staying where they were because of the limitations in the past and the people and those things.
Did Maggie go to Hawaii? Did Maggie go to Tulsa?
She did.
Good job, Maggie. I'm so proud of you. That's fantastic. No,
she's amazing.
She's amazing. Yeah. That what I have found, and I relate this to drinking. I found this when I was a heavy drinker, right? Is that you surround people to make yourself feel comfortable with yourself. So when I was drinking, I wanted to have other people that drank. And so when somebody would stop drinking, other people in the group would make that person feel guilty. Like, well, why aren't you drinking? You should be drinking. Because it had nothing to do with them. It was me wanting to feel comfortable with my own drinking. And so it's the same with money. Like you surround yourself with people to make yourself feel comfortable in the situation that you're in. It'll confirm that you're okay. And in reality, oftentimes you end up being like the 5 people you're hanging out with the most. That ends up being your defining factor. So if you're in a limited prosperity situation, we'll call it that, then what I would say is look at the people that are around you. What are they telling you, and how are they influencing you? Even when it comes to like, I have a friend who's a rancher, and he said that he noticed that with his cattle, when the cattle are together, they all kind of start acting like the same. So, you know, that it's all of nature. It's just how we are, right?
Yeah, totally. Have you heard of the crab pot analogy?
I think so, but yeah.
If you're boiling crabs and you have them all in this big pot and the water's hot, and the crab at the top will naturally try to like get out, and it'll scramble and try to like get out of the boiling water, the crabs beneath it will actually pull it back down in. And you know, relating back to what you just said about like, if you're around a bunch of people who are like, money's evil, or, you know, they hate money, or, you know, rich people are evil, or, you know, you're subconsciously going to hold yourself back, because then if you become someone who has money or is one of those rich people, then all the people that are currently around you are going to they're going to be like, you're evil. Right. And so that's where we kind of keep ourselves stuck, versus, you know, I always like the conversation of, you want to have people in your life who are 5 steps ahead of you as well, and be surrounding yourself with people who kind of have some of the things you want or that you aspire towards, and not out of a superficial way, but just starting to see yourself as someone who can be in the energy of the things that you want. One of my favorite things to do, I call it playing adult dress up. It's one of my favorite manifestation techniques. And, you know, I say, when we were kids and we wanted to be a doctor, what did we do? We threw a stethoscope around our necks and we were a doctor. You couldn't convince us otherwise, right? You want to be a ballerina? What do? You put on a tutu, you're a ballerina. You can't convince us otherwise. We stopped doing that. One of the things that I have done in the past is, and actually I love doing this when I'm traveling, I'm going to New Orleans in about a month, and I've already been scoping out all the different hotels in the area to see where I want to sit and work every day. And I will sit and work at the fanciest hotel that there is, or the fanciest cafe that there is, because I want to steep myself in the energy of what I'm creating, where I want to be, who I want to be surrounded by. And then what happens is, then all of a sudden, as we're talking about, there's no gap, right? So if my future self is the kind that works out of those hotels for a day, and then all of a sudden I'm in the present moment working out of those hotels for the day, then all of a sudden I'm not my past self, I'm actually being my future self in that moment. And then
Yes.
the gap is closed.
Thank you for sharing this technique. This is one of my favorite techniques, and it's one that really helped pole vault me to where I wanted to be, because I found the nicest, most luxurious, richest hotel, and there was no problem going to the lobby. I would go into the lobby all the time and do work. I would read the paper. I would sit on my phone and just sit there. And then the environment just soaks in to every cell. And you just, it's the easiest way to imagine. If anybody can do it, if you know that place, why aren't you going there? Are you afraid that to go there because it costs too much for you, or that other people will judge you? You know?
And here's what happens though. A lot of people, so there are the group that will never go there and be like, well, I can't, right? There's the group that's going to go there and just feel totally at home. Like, this is where I'm meant to be. There's another group in the middle that's going to go and they're going to sit there. And the whole time they're going to be thinking, I'm going to be found out. I'm not supposed to be here. This is not where and it's all the mental stuff, right? So I think the important part in closing that gap is you not only have to live as if on the outside, you have to act as if, and you have to believe as if, and you have to think as if. Because when you can start shifting your perspective and you can start looking through the eyes of your future self, and you can think like them and act like them and behave like them and believe like them, then all of a sudden there is no you versus your future self in that moment, because there's no moment but the present time. You are your future self. There's no gap, there's no separation. And the more that you can then continue showing up, taking action, thinking, believing, behaving, etc., as your future self, you just become that person. And then you don't have to go back to who you've been or how you've behaved or the way that things have happened in the past.
Then all the affirmations make sense. Everything makes sense. When you say, I am rich, a lot of people are going to say, well, I'm not. I got bills coming on Thursday. So when you say I am rich and you're in that deluxe spot and you say that and you believe that. So when people say the rich get richer, it's not because they have money. It's a shocking thing to say. People are going to say, oh yeah, well, they already have money. No. If you have $200 million, if you're not in the proper mindset, you can lose it tomorrow. The rich get richer because they're in that environment. They create that, and it's much easier for them to do. If you find yourself in a slum, in a poor situation, remember this, because it's still a key for you to escape that if you want. And that is, at a minimum, you can start to imagine that the environment around you is luxurious. But for some people, it's difficult to do. So place yourself in one of those environments. Now, somebody will come to me and say, well, Brian, what about the bellboy that works in that restaurant? Why aren't they rich? Right?
Maybe they're 20 and it's a job that they need in college to get through to the next thing. It's not my job to judge anyone else's story.
Right, exactly.
If the bellboy wants to be in a different situation, the same tools and resources are available to them.
Right.
Everyone has their own. I have a good friend that's always like, Bri, what about the garbage collectors? And I'm like, who are you to judge and say that they don't want their job? Maybe they really enjoy it. Right. I found that some people with jobs like that are actually very happy and very content and love their lives. Who are we to judge someone else's journey? If they want out of it, they can get out of it using the same tools that you've used to get out of your circumstances and situations as well. The same tools we've used to get out of our circumstances and situations. Right. They're available to everyone. It's not like I guess maybe it used to be a secret. I feel like it's not a secret anymore.
Can you give me more examples of how you stepped into the gap and crossed that gap?
Yeah, I feel like I'm honestly constantly doing it. When the universe calls me towards something, or when I get a lot of my actions and visions through meditation. So for example, I gave my TED Talk 11 months ago, and that vision came to me through meditation. Now I had an option to sit around and be like, okay, well, I guess I'll wait until the TED Talk organizer emails me, and how are they going to know who I am? They don't. So I sat down and was like, okay, what's one step I can take today to help me get a TED Talk? Well, first of all, I need to figure out, what do I even want to talk about? And I worked through that. And then it was like, well, now you got to start applying. And I will tell you, I got rejected from several TED Talks, rejected flat out. We don't want you. Best of luck. Try applying again, and I kept applying. I don't know exactly how many I got rejected from. Maybe 5 to 10 sounds about like a correct number of how many I got rejected from. But that's the thing, is like, even building this conference, right? I had probably 3 to 7 meetings a week about this conference for almost a year. And the majority of those were no's. The majority of those were people that did not support the event. So, I feel like it's really important to also mention that just because you take an action doesn't mean that the road is just going to be like paved and open and ready for you to go. You're still going to have to keep showing up and taking more steps over and over and over again. So it took me 3 years to get a yes to my TED Talk. And then from there, it took another 8-9 months until I actually gave the TED Talk, right? So things like, especially things that come to you, visions that you have are not going to be built overnight. It's really important to literally just keep getting up and taking steps. Even once I got the yes for my TED Talk, I still had to sit down and submit my first draft. Well, then I had to meet with the organizer and go through my first draft. I had to scrap the entire thing and start over again from the beginning and do a new first draft. And that, and even in that time, I was reading all these books too and learning everything I could about how to give the most effective TED Talk. So, I could have, when that vision came to me, just said like, oh, I guess at some point I'll do a TED Talk. Like, cool, I'll just sit around and wait for the universe to give it to me. But I took action. I surrounded myself with other people that had gotten TED Talks. I asked the right questions. I networked with the right people. It takes so much, but you have to, once that vision comes to you of the idea of what you're going to build or what you're going to go for, what you're going to say yes to, you have to get up and start taking steps forward.
You have to commit to the vision. I think one of my favorite lines is action is the ultimate form of prayer.
Oh, that's a good one.
Isn't it? I mean, you're acting with faith that your vision will come about when you take that action. It might not work out, but if you continue taking action, it is the ultimate form of prayer. You are truly showing your faith. And so part of this movement in stepping into the gap is a shifting of perspectives. I wanted to get your ideas on this, how we can shift our perspective. A lot of time, that's really all it is. To limiting example of what's going on is our perspective. Yeah.
I think, one of the things that stops people from really truly catapulting into that future self is because, like we talked about at the beginning, you sit down, you meditate, you do the affirmations, you have your morning practice, whatever. And then you jump into your day and you go back to the same perspective that you've always used. And the longer we continue to see from our current perspective, the longer we continue to get results aligned with our current perspective. So if we want to change the things that we see around us, the experiences we have, the results we're getting, we have to be willing to shift what we're looking at, shift how we see things. If we see the world as an inherently bad place that, doesn't want great things for us, that perspective is going to inform our results. If we see the opportunity all around us, if we see ourselves as courageous, creative beings, if we are willing to shift the way that we see things, if we're willing to have the perspective that actually no one knows what they're doing and everyone's just showing up every day doing the best they can, finding 1 or 2 steps that can help take them forward, and that there's nothing wrong with us in not knowing what we're doing. I had no idea what I was doing when I started a women's conference. In fact, I kind of look back on it thinking, what was I thinking? Like, I have no idea, no business doing what I just did. And yet I did it anyways, because I was willing to have the perspective of my future self. And I think a lot of people see their future selves as separate from them. They see them as something that's outside of them, like as if we're watching a movie, right? We can like envision our future selves. But when we can shift that and actually start to look through their eyes and see the world through their perspective, see how they make decisions, see the courageous actions that they're willing to take as their form of faith, you know, like looking through that is a very different lens than looking through being defined by your current life circumstances. And don't get me wrong, like I applied for food stamps shortly thereafter, shutting down my business. So I know some people can look at me too and be like, well, Bri, you've never had to work, for anything, da 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 da. Like I've had multiple moments where 9 months into my business, I couldn't pay my rent. Like, I've had just as many financial struggles and bumps as anyone else. I just had a car issue come up and I was like, am I going to be able to afford to fix this car? Like, and that literally, I sold my car today. Like I got it fixed. Luckily it was less than I thought it was going to be. I immediately went out and was like, I dodged a bullet. The universe was sending me a sign. I need to sell my car. And I sold it literally 2 hours before you and I met up today.
Awesome.
And so, we all face circumstances. We all face challenges, whether it's familial, whether it's financial, whether it's health, whatever it is, all of us are facing something. And there's still plenty of people facing challenges who are willing to go out there and use their actions, have the courage to say yes to their visions.
Alex Hormozy is one of my favorite teachers he's awesome on YouTube. And he loves to say, you don't need to have a morning routine. You don't need to say any affirmations. You never meditate. You can still be the millionaire. And I agree with him 100%. And so if I've ever implied you need to be meditating or doing affirmations to have prosperity, it's simply not true. But in the majority of cases, the perspective that you're coming from, the mindset that you're coming from, is what we're trying to shift with those meditations and affirmations. And if you think you can do it, then go for it. Then you have the confidence and the perspective to take those actions. But in the majority of the cases, I'm finding people that have that limiting perspective.
Yeah. And the thing is, meditation is used for alignment. And what becomes really cool is that when you're in alignment, and you're taking action from a place of alignment, your actions are going to have better results.
Exactly.
If you're taking action from a place of like, oh, this person's never going to respond to me, or, oh, I don't know if this is possible for me, or, oh, what if this, or what if that, or da 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 da. Your results of that action are going to be colored with the energy of those thoughts and those feelings. And so I use meditation to get out of my head and get out of my circumstances, tap into the quantum field. I study a lot under Joe Dispenza. And so like tapping into all of those higher dimensional frequencies where every possibility exists. I want to be taking action from that place, because if I'm taking action from the energy that anything is possible for me, I'm going to be way more likely to create the results I want than if I'm taking action from, oh my gosh, I hope my car bill isn't $10,000 when I go to take it in to get it fixed today. It's a completely different experience. And so does everyone need meditation? Probably not. But if you're feeling like you need to get into alignment, you need to get into that vibrational resonance with what you're creating, that's where I say meditation, alignment plus action is what's going to create the best results. And so that's where, that's my MO, is like, how can I get into alignment and then take action from that place? Because if we're also taking action from the energy of our future self, we are much more likely to get results aligned with that future vision that we have of ourselves. If we're taking action based on our past, on our limitations, on scarcity, on poverty, on blah, 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 we're much more likely to get results associated with that.
Now you can help coach me. One thing that I'm always doing is I look at my patterns. And so I have some negative patterns that I need to break, that I look back over different businesses that I've started. And so I have a tendency, a pattern. I start a business that is fully dependent on something, and it's always like walking on eggshells every day. Like this could fall apart. Like I had a business with Amazon, and at any point in time, Amazon could shut me down, and then my whole business fell apart. So I focused on that. Eventually, you know, got into YouTube, and everything's great. But now, at any point in time, you know, YouTube's crazy. You know, there could be a new policy. They could shut me down. And so I've always had this pattern, like even going back when I was in the mortgage business, and it was this one company I had to work with. And if this company shut me down, then I would lose everything. So I was always in a constant state of fear that this company, at any point, I'm worried about this. I'm doing the best I can. I'm doing great. But this company, this outside thing could shut me down. And so I realize it's a pattern of I'm attracting that. I realize maybe it goes back to something in my childhood. How do you break those kind of patterns?
You know, for me, it's always helpful. So I always say there's like, you're either like the mouse on the ground, like running through the fields, right? Like with the perspective of being on the ground and being like, you know, the thing that's like running around. And then there's the perspective of like the eagle, right? Like the 50,000 foot perspective. And so oftentimes when we're in the weeds, when we're in our patterns, it's really difficult to see our way out of it, because all we can see is the blades of grass that we're like running through in the field. So that's where, for me, bringing in an outside perspective, whether it's a trusted friend who has similar ethos and values, whether it's a coach, whether it's a mentor, whether it's whatever that is, and sitting down with them and saying, hey, I've noticed this pattern. Would you be able, from your 50,000 foot view, because you're not in it, you're not on the ground running through the blades of grass trying to figure this out, could you give me some perspective? Sometimes it's hard for us to hold both that 50,000 foot view and the boots on the ground view. And so, you know, for me, my question would be, where are you not believing in your power to be the YouTube, the Amazon, the mortgage company, the right? Like that's the first thing that came up for me, is like, where are you, or is there a belief somewhere around that you, like, in order to be successful, you have to be with, you know, attached to this company or that company or this streaming platform or that streaming platform. So that would be one. The other thing I'd say too is that it's common for, especially as solopreneurs, to be like, I only have capacity for one thing. So I'm going to build this one thing and I'm going to roll with that one thing because it's working. So I'm just going to stick with the one thing until it stops working. And then you're like, uh-oh, now I got to go find another new thing. They say that millionaires have an average, I think, of like 7 different revenue streams.
Right.
And it takes a lot of capacity to build out 7 different things. So it could be, you know, my question for you would be like, is this a giving up your power thing? Or is this just like a literal capacity thing where you could have the Amazon and the YouTube and the book and the this and the that and the like all the things where you just don't have the capacity to build it all out in this moment?
Well, if as a coach, if I'm being honest with you, I'm lazy. I need to overcome that. I'm aware that I'm lazy. I know that I can do more. I know that I can spend time more, but I'm putting my energy and effort into this thing, and then I become lazy. I know that I need to change that mindset. But what I want people to be aware of as I'm talking to you is how powerful coaching can be, because I can talk to you about this. I can't just sit and write and think about this. I'm not able to really address it, because there's a mastermind that occurs when 2 people are talking about something. It's really not 2 people. It's like 20 people. There's something that happens when a group of people Start talking about your problems that are open, accepting, and loving. They're not going to be overly critical, but they're there for you. When you're willing to openly admit, hey, I'm aware, I'm lazy, I need to work on this. And then say, oh, you know what I mean? So that's what I really want people to be aware of, is that you can't go it alone, and you're not alone. There are people that are available for you to help. There are coaches and programs that you can do that can help you to overcome those things, right?
Well, there's a statistic, and I'm gonna fudge it because details are not my strong point. There's a statistic, and it's like, if you have accountability, you are 95% more likely to be successful. And I think about that a lot. I'm like, okay, is getting this accountability maybe going to stretch me a little bit? Yeah, I invested in a 5-figure coaching program this summer, and it was a little bit of a stretch for me. But I knew that if I didn't do it, I was risking my success. Like, am I willing to risk a 95% chance of success because I don't want to get a little uncomfortable? Like, I don't know about you, but a 95% chance of success is like pretty good. Like, those are odds. I'm not a betting person. Those are odds I would bet on. I would bet on a 95% chance of success. And so for me, that's always like, when I'm getting ready to make an investment, it's like I'm betting on a 95% chance that I'm going to actually show up and create the future that I want. And I think that's one of the gaps, is like, I will firmly admit, I'm a quintuple Taurus, and I am like, Tauruses are like notoriously lazy, like absolutely lazy.
Right.
And there is something that happens, at the end of the day, when I'm sitting on the couch, when my laptop is sitting next to me and the remote is on the other side, and I get to make the decision between turning on, right now I'm rewatching Dawson's Creek. So turning on Dawson's Creek, I needed like a comfort show that like I knew. There's a psychological thing that goes behind that too. But, am I picking up the remote and turning on Dawson's Creek, or am I picking up my laptop and going to build towards my future? And a lot of time, our brains will always choose the path of least resistance. And the path of least resistance is picking up the remote 9 times out of 10, because 1, our brain knows it. And 2, it's keeping us comfortable where we are. It's keeping us out of the gap. And so a lot of times what all of us need, present company included, is that accountability of someone that's going to message you tomorrow and be like, hey, did you pick up the remote or the laptop?
Right. There's a comfort level with prosperity. So somebody that's been used to making 10,000 a month, and then they make 20,000 a month, and then they relax because, hey, I got enough. I don't need to worry about it. And sometimes that's the gap, the big gap. You are wealthier. You're in a place where you are making money and things are good, but you might have envisioned making 50,000 a month. But once you start making the 20 or 25 or whatever it is, I'm comfortable. Man, I got to watch the rest of Dawson's Creek. I'm going to sit and do that because that's what I want to do. And so how, in order for us to bridge the gap, that is another obstacle. It's one of the most fascinating obstacles, wealth to wealthier.
Yeah, it's true. And there's something like I noticed that I did when I had my first 6-figure year, that I then just like stopped making offers for a period of time. So what happened? My bank account's drained. So I had 2 $50,000 months back to back. And then I stopped selling.
Right.
And then
There's some sort of natural
into
part.
The same cycle that I'd been in before, being like, oh shit, my bank accounts are empty again. Got to go out and hustle, got to go out and scramble. Or I could have been just consistently working the whole time. And that's where it's like, in that moment, am I going to show up in this moment as my past self? Or am I going to show up in this moment as my future self?
Exactly. So the future self wants to keep going, and the past self still pops up in the gap. You start to feel yourself in that future self, and then the past self says, well, episode 8 of Ahsoka's out. You got to go watch that. That's some good Star Wars right there,
It's so true. Our brain, the human psychology is something. I actually minored in psychology, and it is something that ever since Psych 101, my freshman year of college, I've been like, this is fascinating. Like the way that our brains work and the way that we will want something and then do everything in our power to show up in the antithesis of exactly what we say we want. Like it's our brains are fascinating. Fascinating.
If you expand your vision for what you're doing to beyond just a lot of people want to make money so that they can chill and do nothing. And that is, I'm telling you now, that's okay. That can be a certain part. You can give yourself a 3-day weekend. That's what I do. I purposely give myself, I get a 3-day weekend every week. That's I work my butt off for the rest of the time. And that's, I mean, I'm working hard because I give myself that 3-day weekend. But there's if your vision is that you're trying to work hard so that you don't have to work anymore, stop. That is, make it so that you're inspiring somebody else, you're helping somebody else, you're offering a better a better battery, a better doorknob, you're offering better service, something that takes you beyond just that desire to sit on your couch.
Well, and that's exactly like, I mean, there are mornings when I do not want to get up. I love sleeping. People are like, oh, do you only sleep like 3 hours a night? I'm like, are you kidding me? 8 to 9. Like, hello, right. I sleep a lot and I love naps. I actually took a nap right before you and I got on here. I was like, I hope I don't have wrinkles on my face from like my nap that I just got up from. But what gets me up in the mornings, aside from my cat, is the people that I get to help and the conversations that I get to have and the impact that I get to make. And like, that motivates me way more than sitting around doing nothing. And I can tell you, I mean, I've had moments where I get to sit around and do nothing and it's boring. Like, don't get me wrong, there's like lots of creative, fun things you can do, but then it gets lonely and it gets boring. Like, I know that, you know, I would challenge anyone that says like, well, I just want to do nothing, and say like, do you really just want to do nothing? Because there are lots of ways that you can do really fulfilling things that don't look like the unaligned life that you're currently living right now. And maybe it's just that you're just living an unaligned life. Maybe it's that you just hate your job and don't want to be doing that every day. Maybe it's that there's just another option out there that you haven't had the courage to step into the gap and realize yet.
I keep saying when people, I'm never going to retire. Ever.
Same.
Don't ever put those words in my mouth. Same. I saw what happened. My dad retired. He had full and wonderful retirement account, sold his business, and just went straight downhill because that was his joy. He had lost his heart when he stopped working. He didn't, and he was working for that retirement, but he never had realized that he wasn't. That it wasn't, that was not the thing, that the shining thing in the future self. The future self is not you golfing every day. It isn't. It really isn't. You may think it is, but it's not.
Well, and why not live the life now? Like, and this is where I think kind of the generations are moving into, is like, live the life now that has all of the things in it. Like, build a life now where you get to golf now, build a life now where you get to take Fridays off. I used to spend every Friday throwing pottery, and then life happened and things and stuff. I still take creative Fridays, but I do other things now. But, you know, like, I just build the life now that encompasses the joy, the freedom, the, like, what are you waiting for? You know, it's like we put ourselves through hell for 50 plus years working and doing all this stuff that we don't want to do to then be able to enjoy life. Like, why are you not enjoying life now and building the life you want to be living now? I said the same thing to my mom. She's like, asked me something about retirement. And I was like, I don't think I'm ever going to retire.
Never.
I love what I do. I want to be speaking on stages when I'm 85. I want to be writing books when I'm, you know, in my 90s. I want to be influencing and like supporting and encouraging and mentoring and all these things. Like, why would I ever stop sharing my joy for life?
I commit right now, when we're both 85, we'll do an event together.
Let's do it. I'm going to put it on the calendar, Brian.
And I'm promising everybody else is invited, And in fact, there's some people that are listening. I want you to be speaking when you're 85 with us. I want people to go back to this. We're going to be playing this recording on the stage. Everything that I'm saying is true because we're committing to this vision. And what we're talking about today, if you get anything, is live in your future self now. Step into the gap. Commit to your vision. Declare your power. Assert yourself. This is the time now for all your dreams to come true, not in the future. It's not some thing that's faint in the future. Live it now from this moment on. Anything is possible. I don't care where you're at, what your situation is, how much money you have. Your future starts now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's no more separation. You
No
are
more.
your future self. You're already your future self. You just need the courage to see it. You need the courage to show up as that person, to make decisions as that person. Like, there is no separation between you and them. And you just have to be willing to start taking action and taking steps towards that every single day.
And I'm super excited because Bri has a program, the Beyond Boundaries Blueprint. And it's absolutely about stepping into the gap, coming from the place that you feel like you're at now and moving to that place where you want to be. And you can get a hold of Bri by going to briseeley.com/reality. And you will, she's great to work with. I can attest to that. There's some people in the group that have attested to that. And, if it's someone else, then work with someone else. But what I'm saying is you have dreams. You have dreams and goals, and they don't have to just stay in your imagination. They're real. They're there because there's something that you can attain. And it's all available to you. All we're trying to do is just push you towards that and get the ball rolling. It's so much easier than you think it is. I know there's a part of all of us that thinks it's hard, it's uncomfortable, it's scary, and everybody's going to make fun of me. And all of that is bullshit. It's bullshit,
It is. I'll tell you one more story quick. When I was living in LA, I was living in this apartment, and it was in Thai Town / Silver Lake / Koreatown. It was like in this little area, and I loved the apartment until I didn't love the apartment, and I started to realize that I was outgrowing it. And it was nice because I could Airbnb out the second room. So I was literally paying $300 a month for rent in LA. I started to realize that I was the container that I was in I was pushing against the edges. I was wearing a sweater that was 20 sizes too small, and it was time for me to bust out and expand my container. And I went and I toured this apartment, and I remember it was my intern's first day, I think. So we're at my fashion office in downtown LA, and I say, hey, we're going to go grab coffee quick and come with me. I'm also going to go tour this apartment, but we're just looking. We're not buying. We're just looking today. Right. So we go and we look at this apartment, and I shit you not, we walk into this apartment, the door opens, and it was the almost exact apartment that I had seen in my mind. And I was like, holy shit, this is my home. I had seen myself living in a home very similar to that. It was 10 times the amount of rent that I was paying.
Mm-hmm.
And I decided to do it and was like, I'm going to commit to 10xing my rent and move into this place in downtown LA. It's my dream place. Everyone thought I was crazy. Why would you give up a place that was $300 a month in rent to have other people supplementing your rent to go out and play? Blah, 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 blah. People thought I was nuts. And I did it anyways. And here's one of the coolest experiences I think I've ever had. Downstairs in the base, main level of this thing, there was this boutique. It was called Bunker, BNKR. And it was this Australian brand. And I walked in and I grabbed a few things and went into the dressing room. And I was trying them all on, and I put on this jumpsuit, and I'm zipping up and doing the things, figuring out in the mirror, getting into this thing and trying to whatever. And I turn around and I catch myself in the mirror, and I stopped, and I was like, holy shit. And I kind of leaned in, and I was like, that's the woman. That's the woman that I've been seeing in my future. And And I had this moment where literally the time collapsed and I saw my future self in the mirror, who was then me, who is standing here right now in that moment. And it was the coolest experience ever. I actually told that story to a group of clients. One of my clients is a fashion illustrator, and she got a photo of me in the jumpsuit. And she actually drew me in the jumpsuit as my future self. And it was such a moment of me being like, this is proof that I'm on the right path. Like, I'm making the right decisions. You know, expanding my container in this way was the right move for me to get to where I want to be. I'm putting myself in the right rooms. Like, it was such a beautiful representation. And I just share that because I firmly believe that that's available for everyone. But we have to be willing to put ourselves in bigger containers. We have to be willing to take those courageous actions as prayers, to trust that we're going to be able to build that vision that we have inside of our hearts.
It totally reminds me of a technique that I tried that worked for me. That it was this crazy. I had a friend I could get a pre-approval letter, so that I started looking at extremely like $50 million homes, $75 million homes, dressed up, went with my girlfriend. We showed up. We knew we weren't going to buy it, but we walked around that house like, I'm looking at this house like, maybe it's too small for me. I put on the airs like this is going to be, and then when I walked out, I was just pumped. And you know, next thing you know, I ended up in a much better place that I had been living. And so you can do things like that. It's okay to play make believe, and something happens. It's just amazing. Just like sitting in the hotel, the luxurious hotel, you know.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of these things are things that I've incorporated into this Beyond Boundaries blueprint too, is like, how do you start to shift that perspective and become that future self? Like, it's, yes, meditation is part of it. Yes, affirmations is part of it, but like, it's so much more than that. And so I love the stories we've been able to share today about like, this isn't just pontification. This isn't just theory. It's, you know, it's like, this is real life stuff of ways that we have gone out and like actually shifted our realities by embracing that future self and like closing that gap between where we are and where we want to be.
Thank you so much, Bri. BriSeeley.com/reality. Check that out, and check out the previous interviews that we've done, because we've talked about so much more stuff. Thank you so much, and welcome again to the Reality Revolution.
Thank you, Brian.